Yo, why is the world's largest asset manager going to Davos and predicting a $700,000 per Bitcoin price? And that's not the only thing that was fascinating coming out of Larry Fink's mouth in this viral clip that came out of Davos this morning. We have a lot to talk about on today's show, but let's just play you the clip right off the rip.
If you're frightened of your debasement of your currency or you're frightened of your economic or political stability of your country, you can have an internationally based instrument called Bitcoin that will overcome those local fears. And so I'm a big believer in the utilization of that as an instrument. And so if that becomes true and you see that it could be a proper hedge against maybe hope security or equities, the question is, could you see a 2 or 5% allocation? I was with a sovereign wealth fund during this week, and that was the conversation. Should we have a 2% allocation? Should we have a 5% allocation? If everybody adopted that conversation, it would be 500,000, 600,000, 700,000 per Bitcoin.
But does it also?
I'm not promoting it, by the way. So.
He totally did promote it, though.
I mean, he's incentivized to promote it. It's almost like he's got a ETF around this. But let's recap this a little bit. Some of the things he said, and obviously, guys, apologies on the clip sound. It sounded good when I was doing it, and it seems a little low now. But whatever, you heard the clip. The first thing is, Larry Fink out here, obviously the head of BlackRock, biggest international asset manager out there, basically owns part of almost every company in the world. It seems like he's completely flipped on his Bitcoin stance, though. It's very interesting how the conversation has changed from, hey, this Bitcoin thing is useless to, if you want an international base hedge of debasement and your local currencies are trash, maybe you should look into Bitcoin. Again, very interesting. It is kind of funny that this is the writing on the wall right now. Actually, before I go on, sorry, guys. Of course, I'm here with Nico, our fearless leader. And if you guys don't know Mark Goodwin, I don't think we could have picked a better day to get Mark Goodwin on here, investigative reporter. He's on the beat of a lot of interesting stories, and we're going to cover a lot of that on today's show. But moving back to the clip, the other interesting part is, of course, we've been hearing a lot of rumors of not only nation-state Bitcoin adoption, but sovereign wealth funds adopting Bitcoin, or at least looking into Bitcoin. And if they're having these conversations with Larry Fink, asking him, wait, should we allocate 2 to 5%? It's no longer just a hypothetical. They are actively looking into adopting Bitcoin. They're trying to talk to their, asset managers, their financial advisors, and be like, hey, how much do we actually need to buy? Remember, it used to be don't buy it, to now maybe 1%, to now 2 to 5%, maybe 10% of your portfolio should get into Bitcoin. And like you said, if everyone does this, if all the sovereign wealth funds do it, if all the institutional capitals do it, nation states, and of course, what we love to talk about here is individuals doing this, we will see a 500, 600, 700K per Bitcoin price. Absolutely incredible where we are right now. Before we even jumped on the show, we were kind of talking about this and chatting about this idea of like, what is actually going on right now? Obviously, we have two reigning tinfoil hat guys on the show, myself and Mark, and we have Nico, who was just in a suit talking to Senator Lummis yesterday. This is going to be So the whole TLDR is, like we've been saying on the show for a long time, we are finally in the room now. And as much as winning is awesome, and we are obviously going to see number go up with all of this good PR here, a part of us as Bitcoiners, I think it still makes us feel a little iffy here. Like we said before the show, what's going on here where we have we're on the side of the president, Larry Fink, and the CEOs of some of the largest banks. Like, what a interesting and weird time to be a Bitcoiner. But hey, I guess Trump was kind of right on, we're going to be winning so hard that we're going to get tired of winning at this point. But it is absolutely incredible. And there's a lot of clips coming out of Davos that are Bitcoin focused. Didn't bring them on today's show, but also Ray Dalio's talking about Bitcoin. I have a clip for you guys from David Solomon, who's the CEO of Goldman Sachs. We played a clip yesterday about, banking and Bitcoin regulations around Bitcoin and how that's going to start the bank FOMOing into Bitcoin. So we are entering what I believe is obviously a new paradigm in Bitcoin. And it's just like, it makes me feel a little weird just how hard we're winning and what the incentives are on this. But as we say, Bitcoin is incorruptible, and the incentives, it is aligned incentives here. So it is just an incredible time to be a Bitcoiner. And man, it's kind of crazy hearing Larry Fink say 700K Bitcoin. I mean, this sounds like some bull-tarded Bitcoin shitpost here. And he's at Davos talking to the global leaders of the world saying, hey, look, I'm not endorsing this Bitcoin thing. But yeah, if, just a small portion of the capital gets into Bitcoin, we could see $500,000 per Bitcoin. But I'm not endorsing that message. So it's just incredible where we are right now. So I'm going to pass it over to Nico first, and then we'll get Mark's take on Larry Fink, Uncle Larry pumping our bags.
Yeah, dude. So happy to be back. Spent some time in the Imperial City yesterday and some time in New York. So happy to be back in my hometown, Miami. Lots of traveling, but yeah, man. I mean, look, can't stop winning. It's Trump's promise from Nashville 2024. It's coming true. I mean, yesterday was a historic day for Bitcoiners in our movement. Ross Ulbricht was fully pardoned. His sentence wasn't commuted. He was given a full pardon by President Trump. I've been saying this for the last 5 to 6 months. I kept saying elections have consequences. A lot of people were talking about the fact that, hey, voting doesn't matter, and the system's so broken. Well, voting freed Ross, which was absolutely incredible. So historic day for the Bitcoin movement. And I think it's a testament to the power of our movement, the influence of our movement. I was in DC yesterday. Ladies and gentlemen, our industry's in the room. And if you're not in the room, you don't get included in the deals. And we are in the room. So when you have figures like Larry Fink going to the Cantillionaire Conference or the World Economic Forum, Davos, and basically dropping Bitcoin price predictions, it tells you how influential our movement is and how attractive and irresistible number go up technology is. And, 3 to 5% allocations, are not something that is crazy. That's pretty conservative. And Larry's basically saying that, or Mr. Fink is basically saying that, look, with 3 to 5% Bitcoin allocations from large institutions, banks, we're easily going to get to $500,000 to $700,000 Bitcoin. And another thing that I'll say is we have not seen the executive orders regarding the Bitcoin and crypto industry coming out of the Trump administration yet. We are waiting for the repeal of SAB 121, which will allow banks to custody Bitcoin, because right now it's an accounting nightmare. And that was one of the things that Saylor said needed to happen in order for Bitcoin to hit $5 million per coin. He said an approval of spot Bitcoin ETF. He said a change in the FASB accounting rules, and he said the ability for banks to custody Bitcoin. We are on the verge of that being a possibility. We played you guys a video of the CEO of Bank of America yesterday, basically saying, like, look, we don't have a choice but to get involved in this industry. But essentially what we're waiting for is a regulatory green light or regulatory thumbs up. So I think that's going to happen. I got the Ross prediction right. I said that Ross was going to be pardoned by the end of the week. I'm going to make another prediction. I think we're going to get the repeal of SAB 121 by the end of the week, and that's going to allow large institutions like banks to custody Bitcoin without taking an accounting hit. All that being said, guys, we are a Bitcoin show after all, and we all have to remember what the revolution is. The revolution is individuals, not institutions or nation states, but individuals on a massive scale, reclaiming back their financial sovereignty through taking Bitcoin into self-custody. So all of this news is very bullish from a number go up perspective, from a price perspective, but there's two things that you got to pay attention to in Bitcoin world. There's Bitcoin, the investment, and then there's Bitcoin, the revolution. So the revolution is self-custody. Don't lose your eye on the prize. Because at the end of the day, our mission isn't over until we see the full separation of money and state. Mark, what are your thoughts, brother?
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me, fellas. I'm not going to try to take the air out of the room or anything.
Well, you can.
Dude,
well,
wait a second. That's exactly why we brought you on, man. drop your Mr. Goodwin goodness, bro.
Yes. Well, thank you, fellas. I appreciate it. Well, the truth is I agree with most of what you just said, if not all of it, right? I mean, I think that, well, first off, Fink is a bear. Bitcoin is going to go way past 700K because it has to. It has to because Bitcoin is going to be the instrument, this sort of neutral reserve asset that is going to allow basically the debt pardoning to happen on a massive scale where the U.S. can get out from underneath this 36 trillion. If they want to get out from underneath that 36 trillion, they need Bitcoin to inflate to $200 trillion in asset, $300 trillion in asset, and be able to use the money market that uses T-bills and treasuries from the U.S. dollar system and U.S. dollar debt, these stable coins, to be able to sort of be the mechanism, the monetization, the scaling mechanism underneath the financialization of Bitcoin will be these dollar instruments. If we can get Bitcoin up to 300K, we can get 10 to 20%, go into stable coins. And now we have, 20, 30, 40 $trillion of demand for U.S. treasuries, and all of a sudden we can pay off our debt. So I think there's a reason why we're seeing this mass institutional pivot towards Bitcoin, and basically we're now entering the next stage of the game where it's been acknowledged we are in that room. So we're going to see a lot of wild things happen here, and I think we have to be very vigilant. And we have to be very prepared because we have an amazing opportunity. If that's true, if this $200 to $400 trillion asset class is true, we're about to have some pretty significant coffers to play with. We're about to have some pretty significant wealth to be able to push back against these power structures. The ideal revolution here is not just, hey, we get pretty rich and the largest asset managers in the world and the largest empire in the world has a greater chokehold over the world. That's not really, that's the asset side of the Bitcoin winning, not the revolution side of Bitcoin winning. So we need to really make sure that we keep pushing that way. That doesn't mean we need to be doomers or unnecessarily pessimistic about stuff. This is awesome. It's true. There's a reason why this Davos pivot has happened. And I wrote about it last year, actually, this piece called Tokenized Ink, where I specifically was watching Larry talk to Bloomberg, right around the time that the 11 ETFs were approved. So that was January 11th of last year. And he talked about how, Bitcoin is this, great universal ledger for asset storage, and, talked about a lot of this, blockchain technology and how every asset is going to have a tokenized version of it, and it's going to have a QSIP, and it's going to live on this ledger. And so Bitcoin is basically showing up as that neutral reserve asset that the US dollar can inflate into, that these large asset managers can use as a storage technology to put their tokenized QSIPs, basically. And Bitcoin is basically appearing as this wonderful, we talk a lot about the public sector, the private sector. Bitcoin is this new third sector. It's not really either of those things. It's this decentralized, neutral, as he said, internationally based, right? Which is fun. Bitcoin is based and it's internationally based, and that's fun. But also, as much as it can empower the person in the global south or myself, it can empower nation states and large asset managers. So we just have to make sure that we are like, hey, let's make sure that we increase UTXO ownership for everyone on the planet. Let's make sure that we really don't just let dollar instruments come in and be the scaling mechanism for Bitcoin. Let's really work on Bitcoin sats. That's what we're here for. And, I think that there was a lot of people that predicted this pivot, myself included. And, there's a reason why we were able to do that. Because the writing was on the wall. Trump in his first administration did so much to set up, what we're seeing here now with Brian Brooks and the comptroller giving people the right to hold stable coins and other crypto assets. So a lot of that stuff was written on the wall. We saw Malay come in, talk to Davos, tell everybody, hey, free market, and everyone cheered, right? There was this phase shift that occurred, this phase shift dialectic. And it's really important to know that, you don't see anything that you're not supposed to see, right? They don't let us see stuff we're not supposed to see. So why did they let us see that? Perhaps because they're pushing us into the deflationary age. Bitcoin is very important. It's an incredibly important economic monetary policy. It's very important technology. And so now as we're moving into a deflationary monetary policy, after they just did the COVID pandemic breakdown, they loot the treasury of the world and debase the world currency. Now we're moving into a Bitcoin denominated system. Now we're championing the free market all of a sudden, right? So we're having these guys that have typically been these debt barons now championing Bitcoin because they have it, right? So we just got to remain vigilant and know that we have a great opportunity to slice the beast's neck off.
Metaphorically.
Because we have sats. Right. Metaphorically. I don't condone violence in any way. I condone pushing back with truth, right? So, that's why I'm here today. And I think that's, there's so much exciting shit. Ross getting free. It's so beautiful. That's amazing. Fuck yeah. But let's not let them buy our consent. The world operates in a karmic law. And, that's why they do soft disclosure. That's why they do all this stuff. And so for them to buy our consent with little, sort of crumbs, I think we need to just keep pushing back. And obviously, Ross, just to say it's a little crumb is an insult. But, we have to push back on Poppy Warp Speed and just make sure that, where we go is really the freedom world that we want to see and not just get
rid of.
Absolutely
agree. Mark, you absolutely nailed it, crushed it. I love the way that you articulated that. And I think that's a really good point. And I completely agree. When you saw Zuckerberg on Rogan the other day and basically, playing the victim, saying like, oh my God, we got so much pressure from the administration, from the previous administration. And, it was bad and all this stuff. These people did not just find, God all of a sudden. Like it's literally because, they see the writing on the wall. They see kind of this populist movement that's picked up steam all over the world. This recent, very, very crazy election cycle, right? The mass adoption of peer-to-peer communications, allowing people to do their own research, consume the information they want to consume, and obviously the rise of Bitcoin. So, they see the writing on the wall. They now own Bitcoin. They're benefiting from Bitcoin. So it's not like they've changed. It's that it's convenient for them to go along with, free markets are actually good. Censorship is actually bad. This Bitcoin thing is actually quite good. I 100% agree with you, Mark. It's because they're benefiting from it. Their incentives are now more closely aligned with the rest of us. But that doesn't mean that we should drop our vigilance. That doesn't mean that we should just say, oh, you know what? Larry Fink's my homie now. He's my good friend, right? Maybe he's a good guy. I don't know him personally, but what I'm trying to say is like, I remember 5 years ago, he was saying it was an index of money laundering. I remember the whole, the whole social credit system thing that they were pushing. I forget what the exact terminology is for that, but it's true. We have to remain vigilant. Anyway, it seems like we dropped.
He'll come back in. Michael will come back in.
Mark, we are a live show, guys. You guys are tuning into Simply Bitcoin Live, the most watched daily Bitcoin live show. If you guys are enjoying the show so far, You're listening to Nico, Opti, and Mark Goodwin. Smash the like button. We're at 152 likes. We're at 864 live viewers on YouTube alone, and almost 3,000 live viewers between YouTube, Rumble, and X. Guys, smash the like button. Really, really helps with the algos. I do want to give a very special shout out to Simply Bitcoin's lead sponsor, bitcoinwell.com. Buy real Bitcoin. Enable your independence with the fastest and safest way to buy Bitcoin on chain or via the Lightning Network in Canada and the USA. To get started, you put in your email address. It takes 2 to 5 minutes to get verified, and you're ready to buy non-custodial Bitcoin, automatic self-custody. This is what makes this platform different. When you buy Bitcoin on Bitcoin Well, as soon as the funds clear, it goes straight to your self-custody Bitcoin wallet address. It doesn't even give you the ability to leave your funds on the exchange. Also, if you're a higher net worth individual and you're looking to buy $50,000 of Bitcoin or more, check out their Bitcoin Well Infinite product. It's a Bitcoin OTC desk with a white glove experience. If you're tired of dealing with terrible UI or support emails that take forever to get back to you, and you actually want to have the ability to pick up the phone and call or text a human being every time you want to buy or sell Bitcoin, you have to check out Bitcoin Well Infinite. To get started, go to bitcoinwell.com/OTC. Also, you guys want to get paid in Bitcoin? They just recently announced their Get Paid in Bitcoin product. Americans can now get paid in Bitcoin sent directly to their personal Bitcoin wallet. Share your Bitcoin Well direct deposit details with your employer, set your Bitcoin/dollar split, and receive sats instead of fiat with every paycheck. So go check it out. There's a new product that just released. Guys, sign up to bitcoinwell.com today. Use promo code SIMPLYBTC. All right, everybody, let's get to the numbers. We have tons to talk about today.
I want to tell you guys about our sponsor, Stamp Seed. Is your Bitcoin in cold storage really secure? Are your seed words really secure? Stamp Seed's do-it-yourself kit has everything you'll need to hammer your seed words into commercial-grade titanium plates instead of writing them down on paper. Don't do that. Paper sucks. You want to literally stamp your seed into this plate of titanium. Your words are actually stamped into the metal plate with this hammer. So once your words are in, they aren't going anywhere. No risk of the plate breaking apart and your pieces falling everywhere. Titanium stamp seeds will survive nearly triple the heat produced by a house fire. They are also crush-proof, waterproof, non-corrosive, and most importantly, because this is generational wealth, time-proof. All things that paper is not, allowing you to hodl your Bitcoin for the long haul. I mean, here is the plate that they crushed. They put in water, they put a blowtorch to it, and as you can see, the words have survived. Stamp your seed on Stamp Seed. And you can use promo code SIMPLY to get 15% off anything on their store.
All right, guys, scan the QR code. Get yourself a Stamp Seed kit. Make sure you are stamping your generational wealth and you don't leave it on a piece of paper. If you use the promo code SIMPLY, you can get 15% off. All right, guys, let's get to the numbers. If you are new here, we go over some Bitcoin time chain numbers. Of course, the current Bitcoin price is $104,460 per Bitcoin, which means the sats per dollar, aka how much Bitcoin you can buy per single dollar, aka how much a dollar is worth in Bitcoin is currently at 957 sats per dollar. The current block height is 880,378. The market cap in fiat terms is 2.07 trillion. And the Bitcoin versus gold market cap, still a lot of room to run in the hard money game, is at 10.85%. And the total percentage of Bitcoin that will ever be issued, I repeat, the total percentage of Bitcoin that will ever be issued is currently at 94.35%, with roughly 19.8 million Bitcoin in circulation. So again, guys, we have another clip from you guys coming out of Davos, and this is kind of harping back to what we were playing for you guys on the show yesterday. But today we have David Solomon, the CEO of Goldman Sachs, obviously one of the biggest banks in America, being asked about Bitcoin, what his takes are, what's his view is on the incoming administration. And I'm really glad we got Mark here on today's show, because it's not only just Nico and I'm sure we're going to be demolishing a lot of this. And I know Mark's got some interesting takes on Bitcoin versus the dollar, but let's just play this clip. It's a short clip, and then we'll chat about it.
For a long time, we talked about it, and there was nothing for a bank like Goldman Sachs necessarily to do about it. But I wonder, in an environment where Trump is now talking about a strategic Bitcoin reserve, whether your sort of thought process around how to deal with crypto is going to fundamentally change.
Well, first, and Andrew, we've had this conversation a number of times. The underlying technology is something we spend a lot of time on. Right. It's something that we're utilizing and testing to create less friction in the financial system. Super important. At the moment, from a regulatory perspective, we can't own, we can't principal, right? We can't be involved with Bitcoin.
But Bitcoin. You may be able to soon.
If the world changed, you and I could have a discussion about it.
But do you want it to change? Is that something that your lobbyists in Washington would be advocating for?
I don't have a lot to say about a speculation as to a significant change like that. At the end of the day, I'm a big believer in the U.S. dollar. I think the U.S. dollar is super important. Bitcoin's an speculative asset, an interesting speculative asset. I don't think there's a lot more to say about it.
Let me ask you about this, though. In an America First world, and we were talking to Brian Armstrong a little bit about this the other day, is Bitcoin a threat to the U.S. dollar? Meaning, if the United States really... I
do not think Bitcoin is a threat to the U.S. dollar.
Do you see what I'm saying? Meaning if
there are others that might see... I don't see Bitcoin as a threat to the U.S. dollar.
Let me ask you a different...
Interesting stuff. All right. So first off, I do want to mention the fact that, what year are we in? He's saying, I like the underlying technology of Bitcoin. We've done a lot of research into this. It sounds like he's going, blockchain, not Bitcoin here. But hey, that's just the Simply Bitcoin angle here. But as we've been saying, and Nico mentioned it earlier, if Trump, whether it's this week or next week, we really don't have a timeline on when if he's going to do an executive order on repelling SAB 121, it seems like a lot of the banks out there and CEOs are kind of looking at the same playing field that we are. They've been, sidelined from holding Bitcoin to really playing into Bitcoin. Obviously, it's because of a lot of the jurisdictions and obstacles they had to go through and the regulations, particularly with SAB 121. And it seems like we will see a whole new watershed moment if this does get repealed. Obviously, we do not recommend you give your Bitcoin to these banks, but this does open a whole new liquidity capital for the normies out there, people that trust the banks. They're like, hey, if my bank is allowing me to use Bitcoin, then maybe I should get a little bit of Bitcoin. And the last part that I want to mention before I pass it on to my guest here is this idea of, is Bitcoin a threat to the dollar? Now, I know a lot of Bitcoiners are on the idea that Bitcoin and fiat money can't coexist in the same world. And I'm kind of on that fence as well. But I think as we start to progress into this decade and decades moving further, we're going to see this bimetallist period going on where, you transact with dollars for your federal government, and the real money that you use, maybe you could say the gray market money that you use and save in, is Bitcoin. So it's very interesting to see the CEOs and the banks, biggest banks in the world, let's not forget, kind of not be afraid of Bitcoin. And I think this kind of goes into a lot of the tinfoil hat stuff that us Bitcoiners think about, is has Bitcoin been neutered now that we have, the Larry Finks and the Trumps and the Goldman Sachs of the world and JP Morgans of the world starting to embrace Bitcoin? Is this something to keep our head on a swivel on about, or is it more that Bitcoin's aligned incentive structures will win and they are being forced to bend the knee here? They're capitulating, understanding what's going on, a la what Mark was just saying at the beginning of the show. And it's just very interesting times that we're seeing it. It's interesting seeing the capitulation go on, though there is still a lot of the 2017 FUD lines or even earlier FUD lines kind of pop and rear their heads right now. And I think we're going to be seeing it's the eternal September problem that I'm seeing right now. We're going to have to keep repeating ourselves constantly about what Bitcoin is, why we Bitcoin, with a whole new breed of Bitcoiners coming into the space, and Wall Street and executive levels and nation state leaders. It does feel like this time is starting to be different. And I guess we're just here for it. This is going to give us a lot of content here on Simply Bitcoin to talk about or destroy and dismantle. So I'm hyped, Nico. We're going to have a job for a little bit. But before I pass it to Nico, I want to get Mark's take on this stuff. What do you feel when you hear, David Solomon, Goldman Sachs CEO, kind of skirt around the question about Bitcoin, but low-key kind of embrace Bitcoin? But I really want you to hit on, is the dollar a threat, or the Bitcoin a threat to the dollar?
Yeah, thanks for teeing me up there. No, I don't think it is. I think Bitcoin is probably the only thing that can save the dollar, actually, ironically. Bitcoin doesn't compete with the dollar as a currency in any way, shape, or form at the moment. What it competes with, ironically, is the things that back dollars. The reserve assets like treasuries, that are the things that banks buy from governments or nation states buy from the U.S. The game of capital creation has been sort of a private sector thing. It's innately it happens in the private sector, but it is a private-public partnership where a private entity buys a reserve, some debt from the U.S. government, and then creates dollars in your checkings account. Bitcoin doesn't compete with dollars in your checkings account. If there was a currency crisis and 8 billion people wanted to get to Bitcoin tomorrow, there simply isn't enough block space for that to occur. There would be huge chokeholds. And so they would have to be forced to go into these other instruments, forced to go into sort of custodian situations to be able to get access to the disinflationary for the moment, monetary policy of Bitcoin. So they'd be forced to kind of go into these things. Bitcoin competes with the treasury system. It doesn't compete with the dollar. So right now, the dollar system is trying to find a way to service its debt and find a way to keep selling these reserves, knowing that Bitcoin really isn't a threat at its current to the dollar itself. The Bitcoin's gone through a lot of phases. I think people don't really recognize what the halving process has sort of done to Bitcoin's economic standing, right? And you can look at Ross as a really interesting example. We can kind of tie this all in. When I was first told about Bitcoin, it was right after the first halving. And I was working at a bar, and a regular at my bar was this guy named Blake Benthal, who took over for Ross for Silk Road 2.0. He was the DPR of the second Silk Road. And he explained to me that Bitcoin was just this awesome anonymous payment system that you can use online to buy things. There was no talk of the speculation of how much it's worth or how much it can fluctuate in price. I literally had no idea. I used it with friends and to buy things online. I had absolutely no idea that it could move around. It wasn't until after the 2016 halving, right? So in the first epoch, 50% of all Bitcoin issued that will ever be issued were issued. And as we just saw in the numbers section, we're at just about 95% of all total Bitcoin has been issued. Now that that's happening, Bitcoin, fourth epoch in, is now not really this highly inflationary object. We're seeing its monetary policies change because the halving has actually changed the way that it acts. So early on in its history, we saw it being used as this sort of peer-to-peer, more of the cash system, and being able to be used to buy things online. Of course, you can still do that. But people weren't really holding on to Bitcoin in the same way. It was kind of novel that you could settle, and 50 Bitcoin came out every block. So it wasn't really this scarcity mindset yet. But now that we're a few halvings in, hey, our relative issuance is actually below 2%. Now it's below the target inflation rate of the dollar. It's below gold coming out of the ground. All of a sudden, it's now being embraced by a Goldman Sachs as sort of this digital gold analog, this speculative asset, not as a currency. I think that there's a fear from the government of some sort of, currency, there's a reason why maybe the Libra project, they got, within a week of the white paper coming out, they got pulled in front of Congress because they knew how many billions of users they have every month. Literally, they were like, hey, this could actually compete with the network effects of the dollar system. That's not really the case with Bitcoin from a day-to-day standpoint. Specifically with Goldman too, it's interesting. If you look at their history in Bitcoin, they're everywhere in the early history of Bitcoin. Charles Cascarilla, who's the founder of Paxos, is a former Goldman trader. He and his company at the very beginning, they were a mining company, and they had over 25% of the hash rate. He was a former Goldman trader. Brock Pierce, who obviously was the founder of Tether, was heavily connected with Goldman early on. This company that he started, IGE, this gaming company, got bought out by Goldman. Steve Bannon became the CEO of the company. He's a former Goldman guy. And then you look at, obviously, who Trump put in charge of the Treasury during his term. Mnuchin, former Goldman guy, who helped bring in Brian Brooks, who helped set the rules that banks can hold stable coins. So you start to look at Goldman's sort of influence in a lot of the VC stuff in the Bitcoin space. I wrote a lot about this for Unlimited Hangout in this series called The Chain. Goldman is really all over early Bitcoin, and specifically with the stablecoin play. So it's interesting that he would come out and say it's not competing with the dollar. Echo what Trump said at his speech at Bitcoin 2024, that they got that story exactly backwards. That was Trump's word. So I think a lot of these people are understanding that due to the monetary policy of Bitcoin, it's not an inflationary currency in the same way the dollar is, or something that you want to spend, where you're encouraged due to the debasement that's scheduled into the dollar system. You're supposed to spend it, right? You're incentivized to spend it because your value gets debased over time. Bitcoin's not like that. It doesn't compete with the dollar in that same way. And, fair enough, here comes this dollar analog, this tokenized dollar that can kind of take the place of that, take this debt problem that the US government has, and give this neutral reserve, internationally based asset, as Fink says, and allow the dollar system to inflate into it while retaining net purchasing power of the United States. So I think that the Bitcoin dollar system that I first proposed in 2021, this idea that they would use dollar stable coins to literally tether the Bitcoin system to the dollar system at the point at which the dollar system is beginning to show, serious cracks, right? This is when we should be seeing de-dollarization. We should be seeing the BRICS currencies and, gold-backed currencies and other things coming up and sort of sniping at the feet of a weakened dollar system. But what are we actually seeing? We're seeing a rapidly globalized dollar. We're seeing the world more dollarized than ever. More people have access to dollars than ever. And the Dixie, the sort of relative strength, not index, but that's a different thing. But, the relative strength of the dollar versus other currencies is just booming, right? There's a chance we might see some local tops or whatever. But in general, we should be seeing the US dollar going down because of this massive debasement. And instead, we're seeing it increase over other national currencies. So, you kind of have to sort of roll back and sort of ask yourself, like, it's kind of interesting that Bitcoin sort of popped off on this anonymous mailing list in 2008 when the US is going through its first big debt crisis. And right before the halvening in May 2020, where Bitcoin does truly go below the issuance of the dollar at 2% and gold at 2.5%. 6 weeks before that May 2020 halving, we see the world get shut down and demand get crushed. And we see the U.S. government give trillions and trillions of dollars to our boy Larry Fink in this project called Going Direct, which was actually scripted by Trump and Fink. Fink was formerly Trump's money manager before he even went into the White House. And they make this plan called Going Direct, which gives BlackRock basically and Wall Street all of this money that can't possibly go to Main Street at all under the guise of pandemic stimulus. Where did that money go to? Why was there this mass debasement? That has no ability to go to our pockets at all. Why did that occur a couple weeks, 6 weeks before the halving cycle, when we see Bitcoin once again evolve into being mathematically the hardest money on earth? It's very interesting. And I think you have to ask yourself these questions, that maybe it is possible that the US system understood that the dollar was going to be debased. And if we wanted to retain economic hegemony, we had to create something that would basically solve this Triffin's dilemma and be this internationally based asset. It's very interesting that the largest money manager and literally Trump's money manager is now saying this. Goldman is now saying this. All of this stuff is now out in the open, and was predicted by some people that were really paying attention. Why? Why is that? Well, perhaps Bitcoin is actually very helpful for the dollar system. It's a very big question to consider. It's a very big question to ask, and it's very hard to ask because we know what Bitcoin is. We've looked at the code. We've watched 40 hours of Bitcoin podcasts a week. We've read the books. We know what Bitcoin is. We know that the math is. We know that our 21 million will not be debased. But that's also true for money managers and people trying to, save the dollar system. It empowers them just as much. So, there's a lot of things to consider. And I think that the fact that this is now sort of just widely across the board being accepted, by the powers that be, that perhaps there's something else to it. And in which case, then you have to sort of ask yourself, okay, well, what do I want to do about it? Do I want to just be a little baby and sell all my Bitcoin because I think Larry Fink and Trump are going to use it to do bad? No, I think that's the exact opposite approach. A lot of people in independent media are sort of getting jacked up by this hijacking Bitcoin, angle, or that, the US government came in and took it over and all this. And I just don't really think that's true. I think Bitcoin's doing exactly what it was meant to do, which is to create a new internationally based reserve asset that really enters us into a deflationary age. So establish yourself firmly, plant yourself firmly as we do this phase shift, as this pole shift occurs. Equip yourself with Bitcoin, arm yourself with it. Make sure you don't have it in these systems that can be controlled, with KYC and these other things. Those things are going to ramp up. They're going to start throwing dissidents in jail and doing stuff with their, sort of predictive AIs and, the DARPA social networks. They're going to start scanning all these things. And a lot of the things that we were doing yesterday are going to become illegal tomorrow, whether it's mixing and these other things. So I think we have to just be very aware that there is perhaps a bigger thing at play here. And that doesn't mean we should freak out and run away from it. We should go into it and go at it head on, and understand that, well, the game is on, baby. Like, this is a game. The US government, if they did create Bitcoin, well, they better damn be sure that they can control it. And maybe they can't. There's a lot of things that there's sort of a misnomer in Bitcoin about decentralization. It's really not decentralized as much as it's distributed. And the consensus is distributed among the chips, among the hardware, among the energy suppliers, among the internet service providers, and among the people, right? That's a really important part. The people that uphold Bitcoin, the ethos is actually really important. And we can fork people off, and we can do, some fun technological things and consensus things. Money is a communications platform. So if we want to create new systems and use Bitcoin to create parallel and circular economies that completely circumnavigate the dollar system entirely. The Bitcoin dollar system only works if we let the dollar become the scaling mechanism of Bitcoin. And if we can circumnavigate that by directly doing peer-to-peer things, by, working on scaling Bitcoin and Lightning and having channel factories and being able to onboard 8 billion people onto Lightning, and other clever things like ARC, whatever it is, I don't even know if we have the correct answer yet, but that's what's so cool about this game is it's still malleable. It's still pliable. So if we let it ossify and we let these, people basically come in and tell us it's a reserve asset, it's a speculative asset, goodbye, then I think that, we might end up in a place where we're very rich, but the experiment has sort of failed as a freedom technology. So I think we need to remember that it's still pliable. It's still a game. And we can still push things in the way that we want to. We have a lot more power. If we don't consent to their systems, we have a lot more power than we ever could possibly imagine. And Bitcoin, especially us early dissidents and people that have been in Bitcoin that have, stacked a little bit, we got something. We got something we can work with. So we got to band together, work together, understand and remember who the baddies are, who locked us in our homes 5 years ago, who forced us to do these things, who debased the money, who blew up the mortgage, markets and bailed out the banks and not our parents. Remember who these people were. Who were these asset managers? Well, it was Larry Fink and perhaps the Goldman guys and perhaps Trump too, right? It was a lot of these people that are now championing our cause, did a lot of damage to our family and our friends in the world, and have done debt slavery plays against the global South and Asia and so many places they've used the dollar system as an economic warfare, and they can absolutely do that again with stable coins, and potentially even with Bitcoin too, from a surveillance standpoint. So we need to make sure, hey, what do we want out of this? We want an alternative. We want to be able to opt out from a debt-based system, not enable it. So how do we do that? How do we build? We educate, we push, entrench yourselves, exit and build. Don't rely on their systems. And when you do that, you can truly be free.
Oh my God. Beautiful.
Wait.
Mark Goodwin in the house. Guys, you're listening to Simply Bitcoin Live. If you guys are enjoying the show, 920 of you guys watching live on YouTube and almost 4,000 live viewers across all platforms. We're about to break 300 likes on YouTube alone. Help us break 400 likes. No, 450 before the show is over. Anyways, guys, we're going to hit the news. So much to cover. We will be right back.
I want to give a very special shout out to our sponsor, Compass Mining. They make Bitcoin mining accessible to everyone, from beginners to experienced investors. Their turnkey miners gets you online and hashing within 48 hours, making it easier than ever to start your mining journey. Plus, with their active marketplace, you can resell your miner at any time, adding flexibility and value to your investment. Visit their website to access a wealth of resources, learning everything you need to know about Bitcoin mining. Take your first step into the world of Bitcoin mining with confidence. Discover more at compassmining.io. Again, compassmining.io, and see how Compass Mining can power your success. I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Foundation. It's self-custody done right. They built a premium grade hardware wallet called Passport right here in the US, and it integrates seamlessly with their free app called Envoy. Passport is fully open source and verifiable. It's the most intuitive Bitcoin wallet designed with a UX reminiscent of a classic feature phone, so you'll know how to navigate it and use it the moment you pick it up. It's also air-gapped, meaning Bitcoin stays offline, never touching an internet connection. It's Bitcoin only, open source verifiable, air-gapped security model, gorgeous design craft, premium grade materials. Get your Bitcoin off exchanges and into your own hands in just a few minutes with Passport at foundation.xyz/simply. Get peace of mind.
All right, everybody, that is Opti. Opti is not on the phone right now. He's actually holding the Passport by Foundation Devices hardware wallet. It's absolutely beautiful. It's sleek. It doesn't sacrifice security for convenience. It's completely open source. It's completely air-gapped. This is the perfect gift to give to somebody that perhaps is a little bit intimidated by self-custody. Passport makes it easy to take self-custody without sacrificing any security benefits. All right, everybody. Opti, it's all yours.
All right, man. Well, first and foremost, we would have been remiss if we didn't talk about this on today's show. We got an absolute W here yesterday. Of course, if you're on Twitter, you probably heard about this, but Ross was freed yesterday. Trump came through with the promise of freeing Ross. I mean, there's still some argument of if it was on day one, but I think, as I was saying yesterday on the show, it is very fitting that Ross got freed on January 21st. It's almost like the simulation winking at us. It seems like we have a new holiday, and it is the day that Ross got freed. So here's just a tweet. Ross was just granted a full and unconditional pardon by Donald Trump. And of course, this was Lynn, his mother, behind this account, saying, "Words cannot express how grateful we are. President Trump is a man of his word and just saved Ross's life. Ross is a free man." So I do want to read you guys the tweet that, or rather, this was a Truth Social post that Donald Trump posted. And there's a funny thing. He did misspell his last name. So there's, people trolling like, did he free the right guy? No, he's freed. He's freed. All right. So anyways, we got Trump here on Truth Social, and he goes, "I just called the mother of Ross William." He wrote Albright, but it's Ulbricht. And he says, "To let her know that in honor of her and the libertarian movement, which supported me so strongly, it was my pleasure to have just signed a full and unconditional pardon of her son, Ross. The scum that worked to convict him were some of the same lunatics lunatics who were involved in the modern day weaponization of government against me. He was given 2 life sentences plus 40 years. Ridiculous. And here's a picture of him finally released from jail. So absolute W here for the Bitcoin community. Awesome to see Trump keeping his promise here, and honestly going a little over and beyond what he was promising, because people were just saying he was going to commute his sentence, but full and unconditional pardon of Ross. Absolute W. So I'm gonna, I'll give you guys a chance to talk about this because we do have another news story. So first of all, I guess I'll go to Nico. Nico, I'm sure you felt the same way. Actually, we were on the phone when we both found out about this. So just absolute W. I think L for everyone in the chat that was being a pessimist and a cynical nihilist. He came through. He followed through on his promise. Let's see everyone in the chat start to move the goalpost a little more. But hey, he did it, guys. So this is a W for Bitcoin. I would say a W even for Trump. So Nico, what's your thoughts on this before we move on to the big, I think, another big news story?
Yeah, so I have a couple of thoughts, just because we, as a media organization, we were a little bit, we got a lot of shit for just vocally coming out and supporting the Orange Man. And Bitcoiners are inherently, I would say we're inherently apolitical for a long time. And so were we as Simply Bitcoin, but something happened last year, which was Operation Choke Point 2.0 and the arrest of the Samurai Wallet developers, the attack on self-custody, the attack on the Bitcoin mining industry with the proposed 30% mining tax. This is Cynthia Lummis's words. We're going to be dropping that episode in about a week or two. The assassination of the Signature Bank because of it working with the Bitcoin and crypto industry. So we were kind of forced to throw our hat in the ring as a community, as an industry, and become vocal and speak up and become political. And initially, we got so much crap for it because people were like, hey, guys, I tuned into this because of Bitcoin. And what are you talking about? And like, whatever. And I kept trying to make the case for you guys, like over the long term. I said, guys, elections have consequences. You might not care. You might think you're opting out. But if you opt out of the vote or whatever, essentially, you're just allowing someone else that is voting to have power over you. Is it a perfect system? No. Could it be improved? Absolutely. But this is the separation of money and state, and the separation of money and state is going to require courage. So if I was very riled up last night, so I dropped some original thoughts on X. I was going absolutely crazy. I'm going to go through some of them. So first thing I said, the reason so many people said, quote, voting doesn't matter is because it's easier to opt out of politics than to participate. Even if Trump didn't keep his promise, which he did, at least we gave it our best shot. Courage in the eyes of uncertainty is required to win. I followed up with, if Trump didn't win, he would have been sent to jail for life. They would have kept attacking our industry, shut down X, and Ross would still be in prison. Do you understand yet? So yes, elections have consequences. We won this previous election. Is Trump perfect? No. Is everything that, all his policies perfect? No. Is it like, are we out of the woods yet? No. However, we are not only moving the Overton window, the acceptable window of discourse, but we're getting one step closer to worldwide Bitcoin adoption. And unfortunately, in a two-party system, you only got two choices, bro. And the choices were simple. You vote for a candidate that was not going to free Ross, was going to be very hostile towards the industry, continue a lot of the Biden administration policies, or you had another candidate who was going to free Ross and was going to be very pro Bitcoin industry. And put all the other, political slogans and policies aside, because this is a Bitcoin show after all. We're single issue voters here. it was a very clear choice, right? And I think yesterday, I hope, was an example for anybody who's been watching the show for the last 6 months as to why we took the stance that we took. And history was made. On January 21st, Ross Ulbricht, at 40 years old, was released from prison. And that absolutely gives me chills, because he's a martyr. He is a big part of this Bitcoin thing, specifically in the early days, in the Silk Road days. So yeah, I mean, absolutely historic. Kudos to Trump, kudos to David Bailey as well. And I'm glad he kept that promise. Now I'm just looking for that repeal of SAB 121, which I think is going to make the price rip. I think that there's a very high probability.
No cap gains.
I think we hit there was a New York Times article talking about getting rid of income tax altogether as well.
Yep.
So I think that if an SBR gets implemented this year, there's a very high probability we'd hit $500,000 per Bitcoin by the end of 2025. I'm sticking with that. Anyways, again, and I want to preface this because Mark is here and I have to behave. From a number go up perspective, all of this is really good news. From the freedom of Ross, this is really good news. But remember, guys, the revolution, the Bitcoin revolution, is individuals reclaiming back their financial sovereignty via self-custody. Right. So there's going to be a lot of apps that are going to be developed. A lot of banks are probably going to start offering this within their apps, within their UIs, for you to buy Bitcoin. But that ain't real Bitcoin unless it's in your own custody and no one else has custody to it. So we're going to keep hammering that message home, because it's going to become more and more convenient to buy and access Bitcoin. But I think, to add to what Mark was saying, I think it's going to become less and less convenient to be able to withdraw that Bitcoin from custody, from someone else custodying it for you. Anyways, Mark, what's your take on the freedom of Ross?
Well, a few things. First off, just want to apologize. I am a man of my word, and I say we should exit and build. And I don't know if you guys can hear. There's someone hammering the point home right over there, building some stuff. So I apologize for the folks at home wondering why Nico's talking about hammering, and then they hear hammers. You're not losing it. It's true, that is happening. Well, first off, I mean, I think the freedom of Ross is one of the most. As a man who gets accused of being a black pillar, I think the freedom of Ross is one of the most white pilling, things that, I really had extreme doubts about it happening, not because of the Trump promise, but just of it ever happening. And, when I was running the print magazine, AB and Joe and I really, and really it was AB and Joe that really pushed to make sure, every single magazine, they never forgot to make sure to leave room for Ross, that we always had a page, usually right in the beginning, right when you open up the front cover, on the inside was a free Ross, art piece, and often work from Tommy at BM as well. And, Lynn, wrote us some emails just like thanking us for always keeping a space for him. And, I really just kind of never thought that we would see it happen. And the fact that it did is so beautiful. He was such an important part of the financialization of Bitcoin, and even more so just, standing up for free markets, not in this way of, hey, I'm going to make a ton of money off of it, but because it's the right thing. And I think especially drugs, as someone who, worked in service and had substance abuse issues, and who Bitcoin played a big role in my, sobriety and coming out of that, I think actually the way that you mitigate harm is by having, reputation-based markets, and having, dealers that that you can trust because of, market dynamics. Because the way that it was working before, it was pretty much the CIA running drugs, and that's not so good. And we don't like that. So markets for the people is a very powerful thing. Drugs can be used in horrible ways. They can also be used in very good ways. And also Silk Road wasn't just that. It wasn't just drugs. That's what it gets talked about a lot, but it wasn't. It was really a free market. And that was the point of Bitcoin. That was this, no trusted third party, settlement network. And Ross exemplified that as much as anyone. He was there on board, hosting Austrian Economic read arounds and all these things. He really walked the walk, and unfortunately, he had to do the time for that walk. And him coming out, I mean, he looks really good. He looks really healthy. He looks really happy, and he's getting out. And I couldn't be happier for Lynn and for him. I'm also extremely happy for David Bailey and Angela McArdle. I'm very glad that Trump upheld his promise for them, because obviously the libertarian movement gave a lot to Trump for really based on this one promise. And so to see him follow through, is very white pilling. It's very great. I couldn't be happier. He deserves freedom. I hope he does what Julian did. And I hope he just kind of fucks off and doesn't go do all these circuits and do the show and get trotted out. I really want him to go live his life and, fall in love and do things and have a family and just and hang out with his parents and with Lynn and he doesn't need to go do a billion podcasts. I hope he knows that his freedom is his, and he did enough for this cause. Obviously, I'd love to hear him talk, but I hope he does go live his life. And I think it is really cool, actually, that, because the way I look at basically what's going to come in this technocracy administration, I think was going to happen anyway. So I think in a way that you could really say that, this freedom of Ross was negotiated in a way where we didn't really have any leverage. The Libertarian Party was never going to win. I don't think the voter base really mattered. I think Trump was going to win in a landslide. I mean, against Kamala, it wasn't even close. And so I think that the administration really didn't need to do that. And the fact that they did is like kind of nice. And the fact that these people put their neck outs there for Ross, when I think they could have just done whatever they wanted to do is kind of sweet. So I'm very happy about that. But in the same way that I wasn't like down on my knees for Joe Biden when Assange got out of jail, I'm not going to do the same thing for Trump. And, the same day that he let Ross out, he's having Larry Ellison of Oracle, which, literally started within the CIA as a CIA cutout called Project Oracle, on stage with Peter Thiel's protege, Sam Altman, of OpenAI, talking about investing with SoftBank and doing a $500 billion AI generated mRNA vaccines for cancer alongside these huge data centers for predictive health using AI. And I think that that's also very concerning, right? So there's a lot of the day one thing is very interesting. I'm super glad that he, held up his promise and let Ross go. I think it is so beautiful. But also I think we have a lot of things to be concerned about with Trump. And I do respect the vote in many ways of voting for Trump to free Ross as a single vote thing, in the sense of, hey, this is going to happen anyway, so let's at least try to, do the right thing for Ross. There's a part of me that does respect it. And then there's a part of me that's so terrified of what's going to come by the second administration with all of this consent, because I think we're the only really the voting bloc that can meaningfully push back. We have the resources. We theoretically have the ethos, theoretically have the intelligence to be able to see what's coming and push back. And the pacification of this voting bloc concerns me a little bit. And I've been very vocal about this, about how I think the SBR is probably not a great idea, and lobbying the U.S. government is probably not a good idea. I would rather the U.S. government wither away and every other government embrace Bitcoin. Because I think we're going to have to deal with a lot coming up here. Trump with this mandate, look what he did the first term without a mandate. Unprecedented money printing, unprecedented erosion of liberty and freedom with the lockdowns, and pushing pharmaceutical products. Now he has a mandate. He has full Congress. He is literally already, running the country from a desk that he put up in a hockey arena to sign 80 executive orders or whatever. That's not really smaller government. Yes, it's one guy signing all those things, but it's a grand encroachment of the executive branch upon the checks and balances that are supposed to be a part of our democracy. So we should be vigilant. Stay vigilant. Accept the win. It's amazing. But also, be really concerned about some of the other things that we've seen happen already. But Ross is an absolute hero. I think what he built with Silk Road is a legendary internet website, a legendary marketplace. He's a legendary person. He deserves to be free. And I'm thankful that this person that I do not trust did the right thing and upheld the promise that he made. So that's where I'm at on that.
Absolutely. And let me ask you something, Mark. So a couple things also in the chat, because people were asking. So Ross got a full pardon. Initially, it was Trump promised a commuted sentence, meaning like the conviction is upheld, but he is released. He got a full pardon, meaning it's like as if the conviction, he gets a clean slate. The conviction is just taken away. So he essentially is like, he didn't commit that crime, like in the eyes of his records and all that stuff.
Give him his Bitcoin back.
Yeah, right.
Bitcoin back. Now, I want to add to this before we get onto the culture. Mark, what do you think about Doge? What do you not the shitcoin, but not the altcoin, but like the have to be nice.
Department of Government Efficiency,
not the altcoin. The Department of Government Efficiency. Isn't that the whole point of that whole thing? What he's doing with Elon is to actually shrink the size of the government.
Well, that's certainly the dialectic that's been proposed to us as, hey, this is the point of Doge, is to shrink the size of the government. But in reality, it's not shrinking the power of the government. It's just literally firing a lot of people and reducing it and basically giving all of these contracts to the tech and AI buddies that are surrounding Vivek and Trump. Obviously, there's been a lot of fun talk recently about how Vivek does this whole H1B tweet, says that we're all watching too much Boy Meets World and too many sleepovers, and then he gets fired from Doge, right? And now he has to be forced to run as the governor of Ohio, and just like, oh, he's so embarrassing. Well, sure, that dialectic makes sense if you're not really paying attention, in my mind. What's going on in Ohio is extremely interesting. That's actually where the majority of the tech manufacturing is being built up in the United States right now. So him saying that this is this demotion, especially after literally it getting demoted for talking about using the special visa program to import tech talent into the United States. Now he gets to go be the governor of Ohio. Well, what's going on in Ohio? There's a $20 billion Intel chip manufacturing plant that's going in there. And Duriel just announced this humongous, war manufacturing plant there. Google, Microsoft, Blackstone, Amazon, they all have data centers there. Ohio has become this really big, important data tech center. And who's going to work at these places? The Duriel plant itself, and its headlines were saying that it was creating 4,000 jobs due to its creation. Well, interestingly enough, probably a lot of these jobs are going to be held by people that are in the country using H-1B visas, because these visas give companies, a lot of leverage over their employees. You can't stay in the country if you renege on the contract. There's a lot of price control. So it's kind of this really interesting dialectic where, they're like, hey, he's this guy that's going to do Doge, and then he gets fired for being anti-American and is forced to go, sit in the kids' table in Ohio. Actually, Ohio is where it's all at. That's where it's all happening. So I don't think that giving the power of the government to an AI, or really the handlers behind the AI, is actually shrinking government. It's certainly getting rid of jobs. But the powers that be that are derived from these positions certainly aren't being shrunk because of efficiency and artificial intelligence or what have you. So I'm very skeptical of this stuff. I have a lot of issues with a lot of these players. So Strive Asset Management, which is now about to get into the Bitcoin space, is Vivek's management firm. It was sponsored by Howard Lutnick, who's the incoming Commerce Secretary, who works at Cantor Fitzgerald, one of the 24 primary dealers of the New York Fed, and is a part-time owner of Tether. Cantor Fitzgerald holds all of Tether's T-bills. He was a funder. Joe Lonsdale, who's one of the co-founders of Palantir, which is the Peter Thiel CIA cutout that basically privatized the anti-fraud algorithm at PayPal under direction from John Poindexter of DARPA, to basically privatize this program that was controversial because it was called Total Information Awareness, TIA. It was sort of this post 9/11 Patriot Act era where they were really just making the data barren state that we know of. It was funded by Lonsdale, funded by Lutnick, and seeded by Peter Thiel. So Vivek has always kind of been this guy that's sort of been in this world. He's been invested in mRNA technology. And so I had a lot of kind of a lot of alarms go off when I see a lot of those names, the Thielverse people being involved in this. And now that I see that he's going to go basically run Ohio as all of this money and tech and stuff is going into Ohio, I think you kind of have to, that's an interesting dialectic to look at. Specifically how it goes for Doge. I think government is too big and government should be more efficient. I agree on that principle for sure. I'm not a hypocrite. I do worry about the way that people will use AI as sort of this, don't pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. I think AI is a lot of grift and a lot less, really there. When it comes to really predictive, really, the high level computation stuff that's really applicable to the real world, I have a lot of doubts about it actually being there yet. But you can really use the dialect of AI and be like, hey, we fired 4,000 people and we're running this whole government department using this software, but really who's running the software? It actually becomes a consolidation towards the technocracy. And that to me is scary. Smaller government in itself is not necessarily great. Dictators are very small governments. They're incredibly small governments. That doesn't mean it's necessarily good if they can send you to the gulag because you tweeted, hey, I think Elon gave a Roman salute or whatever, and then they send you to the gulag because you said that. That's not good just because it's smaller government. That's not great. A drone built at the Anduril plant comes and picks you up and sends you off to jail, and you get Neuralinked, and then you're in some... I don't want that. I don't want that stuff. So I think there's a lot to be said about the efficiencies that come downstream, and we should just be wary of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think it's we have to stay vigilant. And it is the state. The state has a monopoly on violence, and it's good to stay vigilant and to question, right? But simultaneously, I think we can definitely celebrate the wins. This is politics after all. Politics is the definition is the organization of power. So obviously it's going to be messy, and it's never perfect. You never get a full win, and there's always concessions and all that stuff. But I would say that, Ross being freed, definitely a big win. But we should definitely remain vigilant as individuals. Anyways, guys, before we get to that, guys, you're listening to Simply Bitcoin Live. We are at 823 live viewers, 415 likes across all platforms. We're at 4,305 live viewers. If you guys are enjoying the show so far, make sure to smash that like button. Guys, we're at 415 likes on YouTube. Help us break 450 likes at least before the end of the show. We will be right back. We're going to hit the culture segment.
I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, HIVE Digital Technologies. As the first ever public miner, HIVE's been battle tested through every possible market. And as the first with an AI strategy, HIVE continues to redefine the future of sustainable energy. Also, gotta casually drop this in here, HIVE consistently tops the industry in Bitcoin mined per exahash. They're lean and mean, they're green and clean, and they're changing the game. Learn more by following them at HIVE Digital Tech or check out their website, hivedigitaltech.com.
All right, everybody, I want to tell you guys about our sponsor, BitBlockBoom. Guys, it's going to be one of the best Bitcoin conferences of the year in Dallas, Texas, April 3rd through the 6th. This is the first Bitcoin conference where me and Opti actually met each other in person. Simply Bitcoin would probably not exist in its current form without BitBlockBoom. Guys, some of your favorite Bitcoiners are going to be there. It's going to be an amazing celebration. They have the Texas barbecue. They have the axe throwing contest. They have the dinners, the lunches, the casino. It's going to be great, guys. You definitely don't want to miss it. You want to get your tickets quickly because the prices do go up. Use promo code BBB21. BBB21 to get $100 off your tickets. Get the tickets now before the prices increase. The entire Simply Bitcoin crew is going to be there. Nico, Opti, Rustin, Dante, Jacob, the entire crew. We hope to see you guys in the beautiful Dallas, Texas, April 3rd through the 6th of this year. Scan the QR code or check the link in the video description. BitBlockBoom 2025. Anyways, Opti, I mean, we got Mark Goodwin in the house.
Yeah, actually,
hot fire on today's episode. And
we still got a lot to unpack, but I did ask you this question before the show, Mark, and Nico's like, wait. Let's keep this for the show here because this is good sauce. So I just asked you a very simple, considering, you've been called a black pillar a lot lately and, everyone's calling you a doomer. I asked you the question because I love the way that you think about stuff, and keeping our heads on a swivel here on Simply Bitcoin is just a simple, like, what is your take on all the stuff going around Bitcoin right now? How are you feeling at large with the Bitcoin movement and maybe even with the Bitcoin network itself? Because obviously there's a lot of stuff to be doomy about, but on the flip side, we all know that Bitcoin is actually what we say it is. So Mark, the floor is yours. What is your general thinking and thoughts around Bitcoin at the moment?
Yeah, totally. Well, thanks for the setup. Well, I just want to also just say, just for the doomer stuff, it's like, I'm the happiest I've ever been in my entire life. I'm very happy. Life is so beautiful. I have so much opportunity to get to go on shows like this with my boys and talk in an environment where people aren't just going to be like, how dare you criticize or say anything, negative about Bitcoin. It's like, I love Bitcoin. Bitcoin's changed my life. It's done so much for me. It's because of that Bitcoin has changed my life so much that it has pulled me out of addiction. It has pulled me out of crummy living situations. It's allowed me to say fuck you to moments where I was maybe going to do something that wasn't within my ethos, whether it was work or rejecting medical treatments or whatever. I got to say, screw you and walk away because I had this I had savings that I was able to not be debased during a period of high inflation. And I worked really hard to, I got into this Bitcoin space as a writer because I was just trying to help my friends, feel the same empowerment that I felt. And that's what I want to make sure Bitcoin retains. Bitcoin as a number go up asset that sits in Larry Fink's coffers is not that interesting to me as just another stock. You might as well be buying MicroStrategy or something. I just don't care about that. It's not interesting. Bitcoin is interesting because I can verify with 100% fidelity back to Genesis, like every transaction that's ever occurred. And I can know that I'm broadcasting transactions from my own node that, can't be stopped by anybody, assuming they get into a block, right? So, Bitcoin is special, but it can in many ways become not that special when we allow it to be reduced to basically a ticker or a QSEP on some broker. That's not that interesting to me. Bitcoin changed my life. I want it to be able to be life-changing for anyone that wants to get in. I think it's our responsibility as Bitcoiners to leave Bitcoin as permissionless as it was when we found it. And we are, unfortunately, I think, going down this path where we're sort of being encouraged and being sort of bought out in this ethical way. The ethos of Bitcoin as a community sort of is starting to erode. I watched a lot of apology about Trump's Solana meme coins from supposedly hardcore toxic Bitcoiners being like, well, it's still better than Kamala. It's like, well, you would have eviscerated anybody else in the world doing this. But the fact that it's your daddy Trump doing it, you're clapping like a fucking seal. And you think it's funny. And frankly, I think that's kind of embarrassing that we've allowed basically number go up to give us this amnesia of what a lot of the space kind of stood for. And that was what was exciting to me. I really leaned into Bitcoin during the pandemic. During the lockdowns, I was living in one of the worst places for freedom during the pandemic in the world, in the Bay Area in Northern California. And I was it really broke my heart to watch these people that I thought really understood it that really understood to fight for freedom and goodness in the world, who were on the left side of the spectrum. I was pretty apolitical by then, but we're on the left side of the spectrum, become these total totalitarian, borderline fascist, not letting me go into buildings without a card that said I had a medical treatment or whatever. And it was just so appalling to me. I got kicked out of college. And it just really sucked. And so I leaned into the Bitcoin space, and I found a meetup that I could go to, that I could still go out and be a member of society and be at a bar. It was very special to me. Those people were very important to me at a time when, I lost the person I was dating. I lost a lot of my family. I lost a lot of friends, not like because they died, but just because the fact that I didn't want to do this thing, made me a person non grata. And now to sort of watch this same sort of slow erosion happen to the Bitcoin space, there's just so many of Bitcoiners now that are apologists, that are statists, that are have forgotten to stand up and are on their knees, thanking Daddy Trump for, bringing us to 100K and all these things. And it's like, listen, Bitcoin was going to do this anyway. Bitcoin didn't need Daddy Trump to come in.
Whoa.
Did we seems like Mark? Wow, I've never seen a drop that. There we go. Oh, Mark, continue your thought. The guys, this is a live show after all. This is what makes Simply Bitcoin. Anyways, the last thing you were talking about was a lot of people, a lot of Bitcoiners looking up at Trump because of 100K Bitcoin, and then him taking credit for it.
Right. And they're taking credit for it. They're looking up to him because they're on their knees and they're looking up. And I think that Trump didn't build this. He didn't make 100K. He'll take credit for it. And of course, he set some things in 2016 through 2020 with some, OCC stuff and whatever. Sure. But he didn't build this. It was technologists and people that took the reins from Satoshi, and built this. It was the people that, like you and people that run these shows and run meetups and run this community and create this, people like Ross, these were the people that built Bitcoin, and made it this wonderful thing. And now these people that are trying to take credit for it are also pushing us towards, I mean, like people being like, the president bought $47 million of Bitcoin. It's like, no, they're holding fucking tokens of Bitcoin on Justin Sun's wrapped Bitcoin protocol. The apologists are it's just crazy how much this, and I'm not even like this super toxic maxi guy. I've never really been that. Like, I'm a free market guy. I'm a free banking guy. I don't really care.
Hold on, Mark, to be fair,
yeah,
if Trump didn't win, Ross wouldn't be freed. I get the 100K argument. That's a fair argument, but what about Ross's freedom?
Well, if, Bitcoin's going to do what it's going to do, it's going to wither away the fucking government, and the government is no longer going to be able to support having people in jail. And we're going to all be able to go buy bulldozers with fucking steel plates on it and run into the fucking prisons and get our boys out of there. Okay, because we'll have the money.
This is all metaphorical. Okay. YouTube.
Actually, on this point though, Mark, we did get a good question in the chat earlier. So Chad Himley, good name. He goes, hey, Simply, would you ask Mark to reconcile the Bitcoin ethos with the possible origins being the government's development? How is BTC what it appears to be if it's meant to be co-opted? What would be your response to this?
Well, yeah, it's a great question because I go back and forth. I think I'm like 55% sure that the U.S. intelligence operatives created Bitcoin. Ultimately, I don't think it really matters. It matters where it's going. That's what really matters to me. And where it's going, it's now becoming this, this neutral, internationally based asset that the U.S. dollar system can inflate into. There's a lot of surveillance aspects that are very terrible with Bitcoin. The thing that's really interesting about Bitcoin, right? I have a node right over there. I have every transaction that's ever occurred, as I just said, with complete fidelity back to Genesis. but I can't do anything with that data. I can't triangulate and heuristically figure out, who did a transaction and blah, blah, blah. It's pretty much meaningless gobbledygook to me. It's just numbers. I don't know. But when you pair that up with an AI data center, you pair it up with the data caches that say a Palantir has, or FBI or CIA or an NSA, all of a sudden you can triangulate pretty much every single transaction that's ever been made if you use the IP tracking, and you basically look at everything, and you start to look at banking information. These nation state capable entities have an asymmetric informational and analytical advantage to us, the plebs, to be able to dissect Bitcoin and be able to use it as a surveillance system. Bitcoin's an incredible surveillance system, unfortunately. That's just a reality. There are some ways we can scale and find privacy in other layers and CoinJoin and all those things, sure. But the internet isn't private. It's really not. At all in any way. And it's very hard to do things private on the internet. So, you have someone like Peter Thiel, who is literally an FBI informant, saying he's talking to people at the FBI that say they'd rather criminals use Bitcoin than a $100 bill. They're phasing out cash. Cash is a really important thing because it is a bearer instrument, and it's not trackable. It doesn't make a data point in a ledger. Bitcoin is a ledger. That's all it is. So there's a lot of ways that Bitcoin can monetize like crazy and become this panopticon surveillance system that increases the economic reach of the greatest terrorist organization in the world, which is the U.S. government, over the global south and over the economic hegemony of the world. That's not good, right? That's not great. But it also empowers individuals like me and you and my friends and my people to be able to fight back and build their own little communities. And we're going to see sort of a balkanization of things within a total globalization happening at the same time. And it's really up to us to live the life that, we want. Like, it's our responsibility. That's what's cool about Bitcoin. It's a responsibility to hold your own money, to uphold your network, to validate your own transactions. It's a huge responsibility. And it's a big responsibility to opt out of the encroaching technocracy that's coming. It's here. It's not even really just coming. It's been here for a while. So to opt out of these digital ID systems as they're phasing out cash, it's very difficult. We have to make these very extreme choices to be able to do that. But Bitcoin can allow you to do that, which is what is still great about it. So ultimately, I don't think it necessarily matters where it came from, although I think that there is a great argument that can be made as to why it did come from intelligence. It matters where it's going, and you matter where you're going. So don't hold all your coin on some custodian. Don't post your wallet balances. Don't tell people you're doing privacy things online. Don't be stupid. Don't go to these conferences and go to these things and dox your kids and do this stuff. Like, get the fuck out of here. Don't do that stuff. If you want to be free, you have to understand the scope of the surveillance state that we're dealing with, and understand that we are going to be directly targeted because we are talking heads that talk about Bitcoin. So I have done what I've done non-anonymously out here in the open. Learn from me. Listen to what I'm saying, not because I know more than anything else, but just because hey, no one else is saying this. We have more than enough propagandists in Bitcoin that are encouraging people to come into the space and take it seriously. And we need that. But we also need people that are in here that have been in the space for a long time to be like, hey, Bitcoin, it shouldn't ossify. We're not ready yet. Of course, we don't want to change monetary policy, but let's get more people on here. Not that many people own Bitcoin. It's ridiculous that people think that all these people own Bitcoin. It's not. It's a very, very small group of people that own any substantial amount of Bitcoin. So let's not lobby the largest entity in the world with the world reserve currency money printer to hold a bunch of Bitcoin to try to prevent further debasement of their currency. Let's lobby them not to do that. We should be telling them that it's illegal for you to hold Bitcoin. The US government can hold Bitcoin. Maybe states can, but the federal can't. We should be pushing all this stuff towards things that actualize community and actualize circular economies. We should be caring a lot more about legalizing the ability to transact, legalizing the ability to not, to tax-free spend Bitcoin or send it to someone. Get rid of these ridiculous capital gains taxes, because the reality is they need tax receipts. They need people to capture, humongous amounts of incoming tax receipts in order to service this ballooning debt. Right? Our service payments for our debt are more than what we pay for the military. So how do they do that? They have to find a lot of ways to tax people. And Bitcoin, unfortunately, because of the way it's built, is a very easy mechanism to get taxes from if you've gone through these KYC services and you want to play within the regulatory regime of the United States. It's very dangerous. Also, you can say fuck you and self-custody and remember 12 words in your head and go to another country. And if you're holding your Bitcoin in the right way, you can also avoid all of that stuff, right? So both things are true. Bitcoin is also freedom, and also it's fucking a panopticon surveillance hellhole. Both of those things are true. Why can't we talk about that? Why can't we say that it empowers the individual as it empowers the state? Of course that's true. I'm not arguing that we should make anything at the protocol level push governments off. I've never suggested that. I don't think we should fix the filters and filter BlackRock's iBit iShares portfolio off the network. I've never said that. That's not what I'm saying. Bitcoin is permissionless and the state has to be able to get in there. But why would we as Bitcoiners champion it? We should be saying, get out of here. We know what you did last summer. We know what you did. We don't want you here. We don't want you playing in our system. It's okay if you want to, but you ain't going to centralize this shit. You ain't going to ossify this stuff. You ain't going to tell us we can't add privacy. You aren't going to tell us we can't add covenants and increase UTXO ownership and get channel batching. You're not gonna make the Lightning Network a silver platter of financial data because you can surveil packets. We're not gonna let you do that. We're gonna create systems that circumnavigate your nation state level control over the world, and we have to just keep our eye on the prize and know that that's an equally possible path. And just because we're going to get rich from this doesn't mean that the world is going to be free from it. And we have to divide those notions. So when we see people stepping up and saying, hey, Bitcoin went up to 100K. You're going to love Bitcoin at 150K. It's because of me. When we see that stuff, it's like, well, I'm not here for that. I'm not here to get super rich. I'm here to exit. And getting rich is a part of that. But I don't care if that took 10 years to break 100K. I would have rather that happen so more people could get on the network. Yes, price drives interest. Yes, price drives the ability to exit and build. But if it's price at a centralization point, and there's a chokehold happening. Oh, it looks like my camera went out again. It's very hot down here. If there's a choke point happening, I think we should be very we have to be able to talk about this stuff. And that's really my biggest issue with the Bitcoin space
Love
today,
it, Mark.
is that we're not allowed to talk about this
Amen.
stuff. And we have to be able to.
Love it. All right. Well, hey, Mark, almost fitting that your camera did shut off because we are going long and we just hit the hour 30-minute mark. So at the interest of time here, let's just plug your site. And guys, Mark doesn't make too many appearances. He isn't a lot of podcasts, but if you really want to read up and catch up on what Mark's thinking, make sure you hit his writing. He's got a lot of writings out there. Of course, if you're watching the show, you can see it on the bottom, unlimitedhangout.com. And I put the specifically, Mark Goodwin's writing there. So /author/Mark-Goodwin, and go check out his stuff. I absolutely love Mark. I consider him a good friend. You do get a lot of flack right now for being, the Mark Doomer, but I think it's very important to talk about this stuff. So Mark, thank you so much for coming on today. Audience, bear with us with all the AV stuff going on, but hey, you guys got the signal. At least the audio went through the whole time. So Mark, thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah, my absolute pleasure. It's really, really special and important that you guys hold space for this kind of stuff, and not in this liberal woke way, but like literally you're holding space for dissonant stuff because we need it. We need it. And it doesn't mean that we don't need the propagandists, because that's important too. We need to drag people into this system. We need to do it. And I mean that with all the love. It's true. We do. We need both. So I really appreciate the opportunity. You can check me out on Twitter, Mark Goodwin, GoodW_IN. I'm writing for Unlimited Hangout right now. I worked for a long time at Bitcoin Magazine. Check them out too. Thanks, boys, so much for having me. I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. I apologize for the camera issues, but
no worries, Mark. Hey, hang out behind the scenes and we'll wrap up the show. Give us 30 seconds or a minute.
Absolutely. Guys, you listen to Simply Bitcoin Live for January 22nd, 2025. If you guys enjoyed the show, you know what to do. Smash the like button. Consider subscribing if you feel like we provided you value. I'm your co-host today, Nico, my legendary host, Optimus Fields in the captain chair. And of course, our special guest for today, Mark Goodwin in the house. Guys, we love you all. We'll see you on a brand new episode of Simply Bitcoin Live tomorrow.
Today's episode was brought to you by BitcoinWell.com, a Bitcoin-only platform on a mission to enable financial independence.